Welcome to Fly on the Wall podcast. I'm your host, Chris Sonksen, CEO and founder of Church Boom. Here you get to sit in on a live coaching session as I coach pastors through the ministry challenges we all face. If you find this podcast helpful, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share. Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast with my good friend, Pastor Gary. He is an incredible leader, and we're talking today about how do you work with team members that are struggling and help them start moving forward and grow as leaders. Before we jump into it, I want to let you know that you can always go to churchboom.org, check out everything that we're doing. There's one thing I would encourage you to check out. Check out the part that says University. It is our Church Boom University, where monthly you receive tons of great stuff. You have an opportunity to be a part of a website that has master classes. There's physical resources that are sent to you. Just all sorts of great stuff at Church Boom University. I encourage you to check it out. But hey, let's jump into the conversation with my friend, Pastor Gary. How can I serve you today, Gary?
No, thank you, Pastor Chris. You're a blessing. You're a blessing to pastors all over. You're ministering to people. And I'm excited because, Pastor Chris, I get to talk with leaders and pastors too all the time. And there's a couple things that always come up. And I'm so glad you get to expand on this because there's some struggles that I realize pastors go through. And so the first question I do want to ask you is, how does a pastor, whether it's a youth pastor, whether it's a worship pastor, men's pastor, a senior pastor, how do they establish a culture of excellence? They want that, but it almost seems every pastor desires that, but it almost seems like there's just this Grand Canyon of a gap between that. How do they do that?
Well, let me ask a couple questions. Are you talking about creating a culture of excellence in their church, or are you talking about them personally creating their own sort of spirit and heart of excellence as an individual?
Really in their church, like with their ministry teams being on time, so starting on time, all those type of things, being positive, have a strong work ethic, and dreaming, and just at that high level. They want their teams to get there, but how do they motivate them? How do they show them? Because Pastor, I know you have 12 churches. You have a spirit of excellence. Your churches. How does this pastor do that? Yeah,
well, no, that's a great question. I think the larger question, Gary, is I like that question. But to go above it, when look down on that question, here's my point: is if the pastor has a core value of excellence, and that is his core value, he's going to need to know that, so that he is bringing people on the team that share the same value. If you bring someone on your team that is 42 years old and he's going to oversee small groups and his house is always kind of a mess and he is kind of a guy that is okay with a 6 when the pastor would rather have a 10, and he's a nice guy, loves God, has done well in ministry so far, but spirit of excellence, you're asking this guy to change everything about him that he's been living for 42 years. Now, the reason I say that is because, and I just was talking to a staff about this at another church just recently. I said, you got to understand there's a big difference between core values and what we call aspirational values. So, and let me drive to the point. So again, let's say that this guy's a spirit of excellence. Okay. If a pastor is a spirit of excellence, that is probably a core value, not an aspirational value in his heart. Now, what I mean by that is aspirational values are the things that we strive to be. So it's like when a church says, our values are that we put God first and that the Bible is our final authority and we live lives of generosity, or whatever it is they say. Those are not core values. Those are aspirational values, because aspirational values are the things you're aspiring everybody to be. They're not, and they probably all will never be. If you got a church of 1,000 people or even 100 people, it's like, you tell me all 100 are living lives of generosity, all 100 are putting God first? There's not a chance. It's an aspirational value. Now, why do I say that? Because the core value, Gary, is The values you are as a lead pastor and your team, it's the values you are no matter what. You're not aspiring to be it. It's just who you are. You cannot not be that way. That's a core value. Like, I love outreach. I like entrepreneur spirit. I love humor. I love sarcasm. Now, the reason I say all that is because when I get people on my team, if they don't like outreach, if they are not risk takers, if they're not entrepreneur in spirit, if they don't enjoy humor and sarcasm, they're easily offended, they're not going to make it on my team, because those core values are who I am no matter what. So the question, if I was asked this at a conference and they'd say like, man, I can't get my church or my main leaders to have excellence, and I'm a person of excellence, I would say to them, excellence for you is not aspirational. Excellence for you is a core value. It's who you are no matter what. You cannot not be excellent. It's just who you are. Mm-hmm. And you're hiring people that don't match those core values. And what's happening is it's a core value for you, and you're asking them to aspire to it when it's not who they are. And it's the bigger question. So the reason core values are so important, Gary, is because when you hire someone, you want to make sure they match whatever your core values are, and you need to identify them. Core values are not declared, they're discovered. Core values are not declared. This is good. Aspirational values are declared. We're going to be a church of generosity. You declare that. Core values is discovered. In other words, that's just who you are. Let's discover who you really are as a person. Yeah. And so I think the mistake is when we hire people that don't match those core values, then we end up being frustrated with them. If a person is all about like, I can tell you, for me, humor, sarcasm. My own coach, I have two coaches in my life. He told me, you're humor, sarcasm. And if people have a hard time taking a joke on your team, if they're easily offended, that relationship is going to be very difficult for you because they don't match a core value of you. It doesn't make them right or you right. They just don't match who you are. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
So what I would encourage you, or as you teach other leaders, is identify your top 3, no more than 4 core values. The thing you are no matter what. Humor, sarcasm sounds funny, like a core value. But if you're not that, you're probably not going to make it on the team. Entrepreneur spirit, excellence, doing church as a family. I had a friend of mine hire a staff member. They all do life together. They want vacation together once in a while. But this new staff member, he doesn't want any part of it. And he's like, man, he's a problem. I said, no, actually. And I told the lead pastor, you're the problem. And he said, well, why am I the problem? I go, because you hired someone that didn't match the core value. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So yep. I know that wasn't like directly towards excellence, but if someone asked me that at a conference in a Q&A session, I would say the bigger question is you need to identify your core values, because you're fighting for a core value of yours that is not a core value of your staff. You hired them. Mm-hmm. Don't hire them anymore. Hire people that yes. match your core values. Yeah. Otherwise, you're just going to be frustrated, right?
Yes.
So you got to know those 3 or 4 core values. So I would ask you, ask your wife, ask 2 or 3 leaders that are really close to you. Like, what do you hear me talk about a lot? What do you hear me say? What do you think I really value? What do you think that if someone doesn't have blank on my team, it's going to frustrate me? You're trying to get down to what's the thing that you value that if other people don't have, it's going to be so frustrating on your team. It's probably what you value the most. You knowing that will determine the kind of people you hire in the future.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love it, Pastor. Love it.
Yeah.
So hire the right people from the start. Take time in that is what you're saying. Okay,
100%.
Pastor. So what if for the pastor out there, the ministry leader, that kind of inherits a team, and some of them are excellent. Some of them have those core values, but some don't. Now, we don't want to remove them right away. How do you motivate them or give them a chance or show them what's expected? in that terms,
Yeah.
how to be excellent
Yeah.
and give them a
Okay.
shot.
Yep. Well, one thing I'll always say is, and I always say, it's like when you lay out expectations, I think that's important because to be unclear is to be unkind.
Wow.
If you're not clear with people, it's
Yeah.
unkind. And in the absence of clarity, people will arrive to their own conclusion. They will. So you better be clear. So if you've got someone on your team that is like, man, spirit of excellence or whatever the thing is you're looking for, and they're not that, it's important, I think, that you sit down and just say, look, this is what we're striving to as a staff. This is what we're striving to as leadership, whatever that is. This is what it looks like to me. Excellence in one person's definition is very different than in another person's definition. Yeah, very different. So you need to be really clear. This is what we expect. This is what I'm looking for. This is what the expectations are. This is what, you have to be crystal clear. You can't just say, I really want you to do a great job. What's great mean to you?
Yeah.
Your version of great and my version of great might be different. Your version of excellence and my version of excellence might be different. So you better be really clear. And so if you have someone on the team that is not sort of measuring up to some things that you think are important, be incredibly crystal clear, because they will arrive to their own conclusion. In absence of clarity, they will arrive to their own conclusion. Be incredibly clear on what the expectations are and what you do. And you got to set the expectation fairly high, because I've noticed people usually fall to the level of our lowest expectation. So set the expectation where you really want it to be and say, this is it, not kinda, this is it. And then you got to hold them accountable to it, and you got to help them change. Now, that's what you got to do with current ones. With future ones, you got to hire the right people. I always say, man, hire hard, manage easy.
Man, I love that. I love that.
If you hire hard, it won't be that difficult to run your team. But if you don't hire hard, if you hire easy, you'll manage hard.
No, that's so good, Pastor, because as you're talking, I'm thinking, even myself, I have, sometimes you get frustrated with team members and you've wondered, do they even know what I expect? And I met other pastors, same thing. I'll hear pastors, vent their frustration about a certain, but does that individual even know that you're frustrated? But like you said, set clear expectations, make it crystal clear with your staff, with your team, what you expect. And then you said to be unclear is unkind. I love that. So we got to be very good. Thank you. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, let me ask you this, Pastor, if I can get one more question in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So what do you do when you have someone on your team and they're not going to change. They're going to be stubborn. Maybe they're not fit in that mold. Maybe they have a bad attitude. Maybe they don't want to rise to that level. Because, Pastor, I've seen this, and I've met with some pastors and leaders that they would rather keep the person on their team because they fear of not having anyone lead that ministry. They would rather keep someone toxic. They would rather keep someone cancerous because they're afraid of going without. And how would you speak to that pastor, encourage that pastor to have that tough conversation? When is it time to let them go? But why is it important that they take that step rather than just keep the person for years?
Yeah. Well, a couple thoughts. The worst thing you can do for a strong team member is to tolerate a weak one.
Oh, wow.
So you think, well, I'm just going to leave that person in the position. You don't realize the other 8 people around them that are strong leaders are questioning your leadership. They're not telling you they're questioning your leadership, but they're questioning your leadership. So I would say to that person, well, you need to know that your leaders are questioning you. No, they're not. Yes, they are. They're questioning you, because the worst thing you can do for your strong leaders is to tolerate a weak one, because they're going to question your leadership. First thing I would say to them. Yeah. The second thing I would say is, if the person is paid, and you mentioned the word bad attitude, I can get a bad attitude for free from a volunteer. I'm not going to pay for it. And so, man, buddy, if they've got a bad attitude or they're very difficult to deal with or fill in the blank, man, if they're getting paid, they need to straighten up, and you need to have the tough conversation with them, straighten them up. You cannot let the fear of not having someone cause you to keep them because you think I'm going to if I get rid of them, I'm going to lose the leader over this one department and I don't have anybody else to take it. The reality is you're losing so much more by keeping them in the position.
Yeah,
They're leaking their bad attitude. They're leaking their toxic spirit. The stronger leaders are questioning you. You are losing a ton of invisible equity. And you don't realize how much you're losing by hanging on. You're thinking, well, if I get rid of this person, I'll lose this. Yeah, you will lose that. But if you don't, you'll lose all of this. You're going to lose so much more by not having the tough conversation. So have the tough conversation. If they're paid, especially have the tough conversation. And even if they're not paid, have the tough conversation. And if they need to be removed or need to find a different place on the bus. Now, if they've got a bad attitude, they're critical, they're toxic. For me, it's not another seat on the bus. For me, it's let's have you step off the bus, let's have you step off of ministry, stay at the church, let me work with you until we can put you back in a place. But it's not about putting them in another seat. Some people are like, you know what? He's got a really bad attitude and he's over worship or whatever. He's got a really bad attitude. He's got a really bad spirit. He's really negative. So, I'm going to put him over in this ministry and just let him serve. You're just going to take that cancer and put it in a different part of the body? Mm-hmm. Like that doesn't make any sense. Why would you do that? It's only going to make that part of the body sick. Don't do that. Now, I would say remove him from serving and leading and then work with him and give him a chance to jump back in, but don't leave the toxic cancer inside of the body and think by removing it to a different part of the body, it won't spread. It will spread. But you got to back to the thing, you got to have the tough conversation. You got to deal with it. The other thing is, I would say to that person is for the future, catch it early. Catch it early. The thing is I wrote a book called Saving Your Church from Itself, 6 Subtle Behaviors That Tear Teams Apart. The key word is 6 subtle behaviors. They're not obvious. So when you start to notice something a little off with someone, deal with it then. Because if you deal with it when your entire team is noticing it, it's too late. You got to deal with it before everybody else notices it. And that's what leaders do. They see further, farther, and faster than anybody else. You got to see before anybody else there's a problem with that attitude. So catch it early on. So I would say you got to catch it early on if you can. If right now you're dealing with someone that's in that situation, you're going to have a tough conversation, and they either change or you step them off serving, work with them until they can come back on. You can't let the cancer stay in the body and just remove it to another part of the body. It just doesn't make any sense. And then again, lastly, and reiterating, is you got to realize that there is much more damage than removing that person or that hole they're going to leave. You are creating an enormous amount of damage that you'll never hear about because your strong leaders are questioning you. They're just not doing it to your face, but they're questioning your leadership. Why aren't you dealing with this? And I see it all the time. So you got to deal with it. And if they got a bad attitude, you can't leave it in there. A kingdom divided against itself will not stand. And I always say that a leader, that I always say this, that when the enemy takes a run at your church, and he will, when the enemy takes a run at your church, he doesn't do it through those who attend it. He does it through those who lead it. Yeah. It's always the leader. Yeah. It's never those that attend. So you're going to need to watch it and deal with it early. Otherwise, it's just going to come back and haunt you, and it's going to and it's going to lower your leadership equity that you have with people. Oh, it's going to for sure. So anyway.
Yeah. Thank you. No, so good. Thank you, Pastor Chris. This is so much. You gave so much wisdom in just a few minutes. And I honestly, thank you. I'm going to share this with my pastor, my staff here. We have some great leaders here, but you just answered some of their questions. And I'm going to share this with some other pastors too that I work with. This was gold, Pastor. Thank you for taking the time.
Absolutely.
Thank you for pouring into pastors and taking this time to do this. So we honor your gift to the body of Christ, Pastor.
Hey, thanks, man. Thanks for saying that, Gary. If I can ever serve you or help you in any way, man, just let me know. I want to be in your corner, and I want to help you win. So whatever I can do to help you win.
Yes,
All
sir.
right.
Thank you, Pastor.
Okay, buddy. Have a good day, man.
Yes, sir. You too.
All right, bye-bye. What a great conversation with Gary, man. Just so many great things that are going on in his life and ministry. I hope you enjoyed it today. I want to remind you again to check out Church Boom University. Make sure you check that out today, churchboom.org, and then click University. It is a great monthly resource for you to be a part of to continue to grow your ministry and your personal development. So, hey, thanks again for checking out the podcast, and we will see you next time.